Good morning and welcome back to day 9 Breakfast with the Beards. It is is it Tuesday or Wednesday? It's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
We're losing track at this point because we've been on the road for so long.
Send help.
But it is Tuesday. We have only 4 more cities left till we get to Vegas, so we're on the downhill trend. But with me is Kyle. Good morning, Kyle.
Hey, how are you, man?
Good. How's your coffee?
It is delightful. It is hitting the spot. We have a long drive ahead of us today, so getting properly caffeinated is wonderful.
Exactly what you needed after waking up at 5:30 in the morning for like the 5th day in a row.
Yeah, and if you take a look at the Splunk dashboards, it was tank cleaning day this morning, too. So 5:30 a.m. in the rain, in the dark.
In prison shoes.
In my prison shoes. Let's just say this. This coffee was well earned.
Can you say that you're living your best life right now?
No, not even close. This is terrible.
So it wasn't as bad as Kyle said. At least nothing spilled or anything like that. It was a good morning. We are unfortunately leaving Austin. We're in Round Rock right now at Dell Tech's headquarters for our recordings today, and we're going to be heading to Amarillo. But we do have a very special guest with us today, Anthony Dina, who is the Director of AI and Research Computing at Dell Technologies. Anthony, thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, good morning, and congratulations on making it this far.
Yeah,
are you sad that you weren't here for the tank dumping this morning?
Oh, well, there were other dumpings that were happening probably about that time, so I think I'm okay.
No. So before we get into the interview, just a quick recap of what happened yesterday. So my highlight from yesterday was we had stable networking while we were able to upload content after our recordings yesterday because we were at the Dell Tech office and we had some great Wi-Fi. What about you, Kyle? What was your highlight of yesterday?
Oh, man. So I was able to talk Corey into pulling the RV over for dinner. So we went to Salt Lick barbecue restaurant and got some beef brisket with beef ribs and got the really fatty burn ends off of the brisket. And it was just... I'm not saying we should go back there for lunch, but, you know...
Do they deliver?
Kind of nice. They might.
2 RVs?
We need to check. Uber Eats. Let's see what they do.
So
No. There's a place in Llano for you, waiting for you.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Done.
World famous.
You know what? Our 10-hour drive to Amarillo will become 14 hours because of all the barbecue stops. So we can do this.
It's worth it.
Corey, you're fine. Quit shaking your head no.
So let me ask you this, though. We had Memphis ribs, and they were pork, and we've had beef ribs in Austin.
Yeah.
What do you like better and kind of
I'm a big fan of the beef ribs. Memphis was great. Don't get me wrong. But I really like beef ribs and the brisket here. It's second to none. It's just too good.
Yeah, I mean, it is the measure of success to cook a brisket.
Yeah.
And we can do a pork shoulder. I mean, no offense, but...
Yeah. It's
and I am not from Texas. I got here as fast as I could, but... I'm a California kid who's enjoying the beautiful landscape and food of Central Texas. But
So do you have a favorite barbecue spot in Austin?
You know, it's funny. I don't, but I frequent Rudy's a lot. It's consistent. It's everywhere, and yeah, you can do so much with it.
So I've heard Lockhart is really like the mecca where you.
It is
go.
the mecca. Yeah. It is. It's it's like imagine the Las Vegas Strip, but of barbecue.
It sounds
incredible.
amazing.
Yeah, just walk down the street, just go next door to next door.
Oh, all the smells. Like you just, if they could bottle that into a perfume, that would...
Now, I will tell you something kind of interesting. So I was enjoying a conversation with a distiller at Ranger Creek. Mm-hmm. It's a bourbon and single malt producer out of San Antonio. And they caught the world's attention, because they made a brisket bourbon.
Oh, that
How was
amazing.
it?
Now, I didn't have it.
Okay.
But there's a thing called fat washing. And Brett, you and I
we've talked
spent
about
a lot
this.
of time. We got kicked out of a bar in San Francisco because of some fat washing. But that's a whole nother episode.
It was brown butter bourbon.
It was, yes. Anyway, so...
Beards After Dark.
So what's interesting about their story was they fat washed it, but they had to do charcoal filtering to clean out everything. The fat got everywhere.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So
best not to do it in the distillery, best to do it at home.
Yeah. So speaking of bourbon and whiskey,
Yep.
You are a man of multiple hats. One of them is you are a whiskey aficionado, and you have a title associated with that. What's that all about?
That's right. So I'm a level 3 whiskey sommelier. I've earned the credits at the Whiskey Marketing School based here in Austin, Texas. I also teach at the Academy for food and whiskey pairing. And just this week in Chicago, I was with some friends at a hackathon. The EdgeX was having a hackathon around the Internet of Things, and we interrupted their coding for a little blind tasting from some really remote single malts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kind of loosen up the creative juices there, right?
Well, what I've noticed about the tech world is it's looking more like the art school that I went to. And there's no definitions, there's no boundaries. It merges together, and creativity is prevalent. Interestingly enough, most engineers don't credit themselves well enough for creativity. But we would not put people in space if we could not imagine it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm only stealing that idea from one of the best books on creativity written by an engineer. So
Interesting.
What was the name of the book?
I know you were going to ask me that.
Do you remember
I opened
the
door,
name?
you walked in.
I'm sorry. I just selfishly.
I know. I'll find it.
Okay.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Perfect. Perfect.
Anyway, so the whiskey thing is my side hustle.
Yeah.
And there was a point when we had a podcast on, what was it, like 10 things that tasting whiskey was similar to data science or data analytics.
Yeah,
So-
can you go into a few of
Oh
those?
my God, I've been sober since. So
Polish off the
I
cobwebs.
think one of the things that's really important for me, and I credit this to tour guides. So if you are on a really good trip, whether it's in Africa or anywhere, you'll notice that the guide will point out the smallest detail. Significant. To make it significant is precisely the role of a sommelier, but it's also the role of a data scientist. So what we don't know about how the world works, the hidden treasures, are essentially the role of trying to figure out what the correlative features are. That's the mathematical term or statistical term for saying, look, what are the basic things that indicate how the world's going to work? So feature selection is in whiskey, what kind of flavors you'll find. Do we have lavender? Is there cloves? Are there, is it briny or is it sweet? And all of those are aspects into enjoying a spirit, but it's also aspects to streaming data and looking for the elements which indicate a pattern of success or a pattern that's going to lead to failure.
Yeah. My favorite data is briny data, by the way.
Briny data. That's
not
right.
the sweet data. That's not good. That's really interesting. So in your day job as the director of AI and research computing, very awesome title, by the way. Tell us a little bit about kind of what does that entail?
Well, so let's kind of break that down. So artificial intelligence is a big topic because it involves what I would call two fundamental principles. One, the interface between human beings and computers is narrowing because it's assimilating what we naturally do, like this, which is talking. We have biologically evolved to have the muscle control and the brain control to form words and speech and even project ourselves into the future or remember things from the past. So that's one aspect of AI. The other aspect is that we've trained the computers to be like us. We're using math that emulates how neurons function in the head. And these are called neural networks. And we're doing this because the ability for a human being to process information is staggeringly impressive. So there are people right now talking about singularity, Ray Kurzweil as an example. And we're building massive blocks of data centers with huge computational power, and we're forward projecting the ability for all of those resources to come available. And yet, for 20,000 plus years, at the cost of 20 watts and 3 pounds of meat inside of your head, you have a tremendous computing capacity and pattern recognition.
Only
Some
3
more than
pounds?
others. Yeah.
I thought, according to Jerry Maguire, the human head weighs 8 pounds.
Oh, the head, but the brain itself.
3 pounds. Okay, we just
Right.
got to make sure we're on
Unless
the
you're
same
a
page there.
fathead from all the brisket.
Wait, so if you eat more brisket, you get a larger brain?
You might.
All right.
Have you not been here in Texas long enough to notice how big the heads are? See, this is the California style.
So that's the AI portion of this.
That's the AI. And then the second piece is the research computing. And we named it research computing instead of high performance computing because there's something very interesting happening in our industry. And that is we're seeing the borrowing of ideas and technologies between traditionally separated categories. So HPC is a computationally intense workload. We are trying to simulate the weather. We are no longer taking, crash test dummies do not need to take out insurance anymore because they're not being put into vehicles to simulate it, what the crash is going to be. We simulate that on the computer. And so research is also going through its major natural evolution to try to understand, is there information in the LiDAR? Are there additional galaxies in the universe? How do we fold those proteins? And so high performance computing is like talking about the how, not the why. And research, AI for research is a very powerful component for what many universities and many companies are trying to employ. So we look at artificial intelligence in two functions. How can I get the computers to tell me more about the operations, be better at sales, be more intimate with our customers and what their feelings are, to make sure the inventory levels are properly trained with a robot, and do discoveries. So this is a science of decisions and a science of discovery. So that's essentially it. And unfortunately, the human language is limited in information technology. So we kind of hover around a few key core words, and AI and researchers seem to be it.
I feel like
Long answers to a really
AI
simple question.
/ ML is the most overused, 4 letters out there right now.
And I like machines.
Yeah.
No, and I like the idea of machine learning, but it used to be called predictive analytics. Before that, it was called statistics.
Pattern recognition.
And it's essentially it's the same.
Yeah. So looking at the AI portion, how is Dell enabling customers to be able to do what you just talked about?
Well, it's interesting. So I want to maybe frame this in an expression that we're actually stealing from other people at the company and probably others in the industry, and that is there's a hierarchy of needs. And the reason why I want to set this up is because too often engineers and consultants will run into a burning building known as a business problem and say that they have the fire hose to put it out. And really, they're only talking about a very specific technology angle or skill set. So the hierarchy of needs was an idea framed by Abraham Maslow, who was the first in the world of positive psychology. Do you know what positive psychology is?
No, what is it?
Okay, so for many years, when we learned about the human condition, we studied abnormalities.
Okay.
So Freud wanted to know why there was all these psychosis and fixations. We studied broken people to figure out how we actually worked. Abraham Maslow decided to focus on highly successful, self-aware, and highly capable individuals, and then broke this down into a series of skills or capabilities. Okay. Now this is called the hierarchy of needs, and it starts with a very simple idea that at the base you need your basic human needs met from a physiological. That means food, shelter, water, etc. If you do not have that, you are not to worry about safety. Safety actually comes after food and water and shelter. Right. So, like this RV, you have to make sure that the plumbing's working and that you can eat and have done a brisket before you can move on to the next level. Now, at the top of the pyramid is something called self-actualization, which is a fancy term for being the best of who you can be.
Okay.
Fine. Now, it's about 3 or 4 or 5 layers in this hierarchy of needs, and what I'm here to tell you is that there is an artificial intelligence hierarchy of needs, and it begins with the business problem or the use case. Now, there are several things like frameworks and software that come above that. The immediate thing above use case is data. So if you have a business problem, the next question is, what information do I need to gather in order to understand if we're successful or what the pattern is?
Yeah.
And the last thing at the tippy top, and I'm not saying it's the pinnacle, is infrastructure. So you asked us a very simple question like, what does this company, Dell Technologies, do in order to support customers on their journey? Well, gosh, we make hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the hardware is really important. It's important because all of these fancy neural networks, all the algorithms were codified in the 50s, 60s, and then 80s, but they face planted.
Mm-hmm.
You know why they face planted?
Not enough compute, not enough access to data, technology.
Right, two things. We needed to be able to get enough data in one place.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to the internet, we do that all the time. It's called clickstream. And then secondly, we have enough computational resources, GPUs as an example, where you can put 20,000 cores in a pizza box.
Mm-hmm.
So those two things come together, and now all of a sudden we have powerful ability to understand the universe. But here's the thing. Because infrastructure is very important and the algorithms actually do the work, how does that actually marry together? How do we make this an easy choice so that the code is best optimized?
Mm-hmm.
What are the various knobs and settings that makes it run?
Right.
How do we operate in a way that is friction-free so that data scientists can access this information without having to bother someone else? And imagine the pain, get this, imagine the pain if you had asked Corey to tie your shoes because you just couldn't reach them. That's basically what a data
One more
scientist...
brisket and I won't be able to.
Well, I mean, that's the kind of thing.
Yeah.
So self-service is self-empowerment, and that's all part of it. And so our job is to put this, all of these bits and pieces together, these open source frameworks, in a way that you're off to doing the problem solving with IT, not fixing the IT, which apparently is one of the problems Corey's having with a lot of the podcast equipment. Is
Well,
fixing the IT.
Yeah, I would say the RV hierarchy of needs, networking is definitely the first
Yes.
one there.
Battery life.
Oh, so we are live right now. Awesome.
There we go. Now, we've talked a lot about kind of the hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
We're at the sweet spot where we have enough compute power, we have enough data, now we have the math behind it.
Yep.
And that's going to incubate different trends and technologies. What kind of emerging trends and technologies are you seeing come out of this perfect storm of AI?
Well, so interestingly enough, there's a lot of attention on natural language processing.
Okay.
And I am just the geek to, even though I was not an English major, I wanted to be one. I went to art school and did paintings and pictures.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a master's degree in painting.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. And here I am stuck
Here
in
you are.
technology, handcuffed. As my therapist said yesterday, we have the keys to our own prison. So apparently I'm in this delightful prison called information technology. And one of the key trends is really studying the human language and what people are saying. A lot of interest around the call center. Oh, by the way, the most delightful expression I had recently was talking to somebody in a call center. And in the middle of my frustration, I took a pause. I said, you know this is being recorded, and I'm saying things in a certain way for a certain reason. And she was baffled. She's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, the reason why it's being recorded for training purposes is because computers are training, not human beings. And so, yeah, understanding the call, I know, exactly.
Blew her mind.
You ruined her day.
Right, so I was basically trying to play with the algorithms by inserting words that were non sequiturs.
Well, now I have a new way of messing with
Ice cream
call
sandwich.
centers and everything. Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh my gosh, we got to get on a call center phone.
No, natural language processing, really cool. What else?
Yeah. Oh, so I there's a big interest around fraud detection. And this has really, it's an interesting one because fraud comes in different ways. I used to think it was about anomaly detection, and to a degree, a big portion of finding the bad actors is finding the people that are pretending to be the good people but aren't. But when you are out and about and you're swiping your card, or you have card not present, which is about 80% of all the transactions, they're looking for identity verification.
Yeah.
So it's like the other side of that coin. How many different ways can we determine it's actually you? Now, our friends at MasterCard, we've done a lot of work with them and a lot of public exposure with MasterCard. will tell you that they have now moved from 15 variables to identify your like, are you in your home zip code? Do you have the 3-digit number on the back of the card? All that kind of stuff. They moved from those 15 to 150 different variables.
Wow.
Which they have to process in what?
Sub-second.
Yeah. 300 milliseconds. That's kind of thing, because most people get annoyed. And so the brightness of the screen of your phone is a digital signature. And that's another...
You're blowing my mind here.
I know. Look at... We just zoom in on Kyle.
Yeah,
oh, my God.
Well, somebody has to listen to the Big Data Beer podcast.
I'm telling you.
So that's another one. Fraud detection, trying to figure stuff out. I mean, I think about Splunk in every one of these use cases because, in a way, I'm really fascinated with science, interestingly enough, and machines are admitting, not admitting, but emitting or confessing themselves all the time. When you're a mechanic with 30 years with experience, like the car guys, you can have people use their mouth to emulate the sound of the vehicle, and they will do a root cause analysis, right? Right?
Yeah.
And that's the car guys. Click and clack, the Tappet brothers. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you could wire that up with sensors or as temperatures, vibration, you are now listening to your RV as it goes down the road, much the way that you're already listening to your Spotify, and really identifying trends. And the shake, rattle, and roll may not be just from Spotify. It may be from the wheel that's about ready to bust, and you just spend $500 on spare tires. What? Oh, higher than $500. Corey's, yeah, Corey's writing big checks back there.
I will say we actually went back and looked at the vibration data, and we went into a hour time where we thought we were when the tire popped, and there were a few big spikes, so we were able to see it. Now it was reactive, but to your point, how can we get that data to help be more proactive?
Right. Learning. Yeah.
Cool.
Apparently vibration is an interesting one from whiskey production too.
Yeah.
So that can actually change. You know, one of the key things that the big ahas in the whiskey just kind of swing right back into home territory for yours truly is if you look at a 21-year-old Scotch whiskey and you compare it to a 3-year-old bourbon, you're going to notice that the bourbon is dark caramel colored and that Scotch whiskey is pale straw colored.
Okay.
Now, why is a 3-year-old, if the color of the spirit comes from the duration in the wood, the exposure time, why is it that the Scots have something really pale and the Kentucky and Tennessee folks have really dark stuff?
I really want to make like a sun joke, but I don't know. Why is it?
Well, I mean, I kind of tip my hat with the vibration, but it really has nothing to do with vibration. Because they're not moving around in the... Any thoughts over there? Pensive Kyle. Kyle from abroad.
For Tennessee, it would be the charring of the barrels inside, right?
Charring? Well, get this. So what do you think the folks from Kentucky do with the empty barrels?
They send them over to Scotland.
They sell them to the cheap Scots, and I mean that in the spirit of love. So it's not about just age. It's about temperature. It's about temperature. And every distiller or cask master, I guess, will tell you that the barrels at the top they're warmer, and so they'll have a different flavor profile than the ones on the bottom.
Okay.
And some will actually blend the tops and the bottoms to get a consistent product. That's part of the distillation process and quality control. But we're just really talking about, again, machine data, even though there may not be sensors in the warehouse. But all of these things can matter and can reignite a craftsman ability to control the product. What's the difference between French wine and California wine? Any idea?
Location of production?
Yes. Some would say the soil matters, but there's really good climates in both places that have warm days and cool nights. You have good limestone or good mineral components, in the terroir. Some would argue it's the microbiome. But one of the hidden differences between those two different countries is that if you were to buy French futures, you shouldn't be surprised to find that some of the bottlings aren't very good because they spoiled because of the cork. There's a lot of inconsistencies. What Americans have done with wine production is they made it an industrial effort.
Hmm.
So they are controlling temperatures with fans at night. They're doing a lot of things to intervene.
Yeah.
And so I bring this idea of food and wine and spirits and RV all to a head and to talk about Splunk because I'm a huge fan. And if we could instrument our world in such a way that we are capturing the information that is relevant,
Mhm.
we can intercede and make better decisions. And I'm, at the end of the day, I'm really like this idea of decision sciences.
Yeah.
And how technology helps us there.
What do you think is the reason that everything isn't getting instrumented outright? Do you think it's just people adapting to it? Do you think the technology has a bit of time to catch up? Regulatory?
Well, I remember, and I'll credit IDC when they were speaking about this, is that the cost of the sensors are rapidly plummeting.
Yes.
Anytime you have mass production of something, it gets cheaper,
Mm-hmm.
which is why you should always wait for the next generation of television because you need the high volume to bring it affordable. But sensors got really, really cheap. And right now we are carrying around an incredible sensory device in our pockets that
Mhm.
understands the tilt, temperature, location. It has some really basic features. And if you augment that with what you're saying and when you're saying it, you can get some really powerful insights to that. So I'm wearing a smartwatch. Yeah.
I think
All right,
everybody
so
in the
there's more
RV has
sensors
one.
going on.
Yeah, more sensors.
You got to get that health data somehow.
And anyway, so this is what's starting to emerge. Health sensor information, biometric information. There are really interesting things that are happening in the sports industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I read about a case where some are putting a sleeve over a pitcher to determine muscle fatigue. And one of the bigger issues is not how to get the information out, not whether we're pulling the pitcher off too early or too late. The fundamental issue is whose data is it actually,
Mm.
and is there a liability or responsibility for a manager to end a contract with a player because of this data?
That's interesting.
Like
Right.
you are fatiguing out, so we're going to enter a contract and you can be a free agent or find another job.
Which
Wow.
could grossly change that single industry, right? It could flip it upside down because if we're changing contracts at a different pace than what we've been used to.
Here's what's interesting, and I don't spend a lot of time reading about technology. I spent a lot of time talking about or reading about social sciences and that kind of stuff. There was a great feature by Broken Records, the Malcolm Gladwell podcast
Mm-hmm.
called Revisionist History.
Yeah.
And they had a feature about the NBA referees who are being monitored in a secreted location in New Jersey, and there are additional referees studying the cameras, and then at a given moment they can go back and review. Now, part of the story is sad. It's because here you have professionals that are working in adverse conditions with highly paid and quite what's the right word, full of themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying I did not foul or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they're working in these adverse conditions, high pressure situation. You got literally the world watching you, streamed to China, wherever, and
Not a lot of pressure.
you're making instantaneous judgment call that can affect the outcome of so many people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that's not a hard job. then to have it filmed and being second guessed.
Right.
So what's my point? My point is there is actually a natural positive outcome to this because the quality of the refereeing actually increases.
Okay.
So the inspection, whereas putting additional pressure can actually create a better product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things pan out. But that's kind of the observation that I've been noticing.
Yeah.
So, staying with Splunk, and you do talk to a lot of customers, what
Yep.
are you seeing out there as far as challenges that customers have, whether it's using Splunk or other data analytics technologies? What are their biggest challenges today?
Well, a lot of the key questions that come up are, do I put this in the cloud or do I not put this in the cloud? And unfortunately, a Unfortunately, public cloud is too easy. There are wonderful, brilliant upsides to public cloud, and customers should embrace this. The downside to this is what we call data gravity, or the cost of ingress and egress of that. And the other cost is, and it's not lost on anyone in a military uniform,
Okay.
that, and you know this, being on the road, you do not have consistent Wi-Fi.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you were going to ask Siri or Tesla to make sure that the thing ahead of you is not a deer or a shadow, and you had to get uploaded and send that back down,
Mm-hmm.
you could be wrapped around a tree,
Yep.
right? So we need this
take a little
thing
bit of
idea
time.
of edge computing,
Hmm.
which is lost on the folks in the bubble. And I'm going to point that at my brothers and sisters in California and anyone on the West Coast, because they're in the bubble.
Okay.
You know, people in the bubble in New York City back in the 80s thought that those suede high-top shoes were the thing because they were in the bubble. And people in the West Coast are in the bubble. It's like, the last time I was picking out a Tesla, and you're saying that in Nebraska, you realize how ridiculous that sounds.
Right.
But that's essentially what's happening. So there's this irrational exuberance on the public cloud, and it will have a cost, and there's benefits, but there is a cost, and trying to take something that should be done locally and make it central has a penalty.
Yeah, it's interesting how you need to make sure that you repatriate your applications and rebuild your applications to make them operate in a cloud-like consistent model instead of just going lifting and shifting.
I like
right?
how you say that, cloud-like. It's more of an engagement model than a destination. That's how we like to describe it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But our world is now colored based on the mobile phone.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember the time at a stoplight I signed a contract for a house. Now, I'm old enough. Yeah, you just keep nodding.
No.
I'm old enough to remember racing to a fax machine on holiday to make sure that we got our offer in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was how you did it.
I
It's like, what's your fax number?
was just thinking last
That
year.
means facsimile to you young millennials.
Well, even for this trip, we had to sign some
Facsimile.
documents, and Corey just took a picture of them
Yeah.
with his phone and sent them off. We didn't even have to scan them. I mean, yeah.
I laugh because we're doing taxes and we have to do taxes in 2 different countries,
Oh.
and we've done it without paper. I mean, we've been digitally signing everything and just moving it back and forth, without having to print a single piece of paper. So it's absolutely
Expectations are changing.
Yes.
And so this is what's happened, is that there's expectations that are changing. And the other thing that's very interesting here is that software companies are coding their products for cloud compute and storage models, which is brilliant, but somewhat unnatural.
Yep.
It wasn't natural to build Formica, but we needed cheap, inexpensive product to fill out this RV, and to do storage in object is brilliant if you want to have billions of objects and be able to find them quickly.
Yep.
But it's not how you want to run your database. But oddly enough, we're seeing data warehouse-like software emerge, whereas this actual data is running in non-native formats. And so that's the other thing I'm noticing is we're seeing software providers moving towards default standards that weren't natural but are more common, and there's value in being common.
Yeah. Okay.
So didn't mean to drop that
that was great.
turd in the punch bowl, but there you go.
So, I mean, you have talked about this RV a lot. Would you like to come with us for the next leg of the trip?
I would love to enjoy the sights and smells of this RV.
But we will see you soon enough because you will be at conf as well,
Yes,
and we're
can't
excited
wait.
to have you. So, what are you excited about for conf? What are you most looking
Well,
forward to?
I'm being selfish here, but I wanna be there to watch the RV roll into the conference. That's
Yeah.
what I really.
We're pretty
That's what I'm
excited about
most
that.
excited about. Like,
It'll be
the creaking of the door, the cursing, the near flat tire as we went over the thing.
Accidentally dumping our
Corey.
tanks and
If it was a cartoon panel, it would have an exclamation point above the RV as it went in.
Yeah, we should. If anybody's listening that is a cartoonist, that would be a good little
A
drawing.
good little
for
project.
him.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, Anthony, it's been so great having you on Breakfast with the Beards. By the way, I didn't even mention this. Great big data
Thank
beard
you.
right there.
Thank you.
Absolutely
It
incredible.
took me 9 days to fill it in.
You sneeze and it grows.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in a few days.
Yes. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Breakfast with the Beards. Breakfast with the Beards is part of the Big Data Beard road trip to Splunk's Conf 2019. Be sure to check out all of our great content at bigdatabeard.com and also follow our podcast in your favorite podcast app simply by searching Big Data Beard. This amazing adventure would not be possible without our incredible sponsors. We thank you, Dell Technologies, VMware, Red River Technologies, Arrow Electronics, and Converging Data for making the road trip to Splunk.conf 2019 possible. We'll see you down the road.